So what I perceive is happening is that the knowledge systems that are necessary for the digital age require a very quick upgrade of the old institutional modernists into postmodernist kinds of systems. But the speed of the upgrade that's required because of the changes that are happening is outstripping what the normal developmental process of a paradigm is. Okay, so our paradigm shifts are happening faster and faster. Paradigm shift is what are the model of what is and ought, what is the central mode of justification, which then legitimizes and normalizes practices, and all of that is embedded. And I use psychology for an example. So psychology got itself tracked into an empirical system of justification, and then established and networked that system, and that's how you would advance in the field. At least from where I sit, it's crystal clear that that's inadequate. But the system now is so entrenched in that particular process that even though it's known to be inadequate, and it's definitely known not to be, not only known to be inadequate in terms of within the system, but in terms of what the system should be trying to do for the world and for society, it's completely inadequate. Yet there's no capacity for the system to actually upgrade fast enough and respond to that. So it's entrenched and then stuck, and then it's quagmired into a nightmare. And at least as far as I'm concerned, I mean, this is what kicks me out of the discipline, basically, and now into the outside. It's just sort of like, yeah, this system's not.
What do you mean by that? Like, that's what kicks me out of the system. I don't understand that. I want you to explain what you're meaning by that with specific reference to yourself.
Sure. I mean, I grow up inside, the academy. So, I mean, both my parents have their doctorates. My dad's a professor. My mom's an adjunct professor. I go from, my undergraduate to my master's degree with like 1 year off into a doctoral, into a postdoctoral at the University of Pennsylvania with Beck, and who's a father of cognitive therapy. So I'm like nested inside of the system, okay? And I'm playing by its rules. And I'm under the impression that there are various ways to make differences in the system. And so I then carve a path, which in retrospect, the path that I ended up carving was too far outside of the institutional power structures and too much alone, even though I played by the rules. And what I mean by that is that I did go theory, and that is unusual. So that's one move that's unusual. But I did establish myself first in relationship to the traditional authority, like Beck, and published empirical and knew all how to do that. Now I could have continued in that little trail, and I mean, I stayed in as long as I could take it, and before I needed my freedom to get out. But then I jumped into James Madison University. Obviously not Harvard by any stretch, but it's a solid place with a unique kind of opportunity, and I could then continue to publish, and I did get published systems, but what happened over time is that there are a couple of ways to think about what I saw. So one broad way of thinking about, certainly how I think about it now, is that I was positioning myself with what would be known, what I now would be able to label as a meta-modern sensibility. Okay, so metamodernism is a sensibility of the thing that comes after postmodernism. Okay, so you have a modernist sensibility is coming off of the Enlightenment that basically says, hey, we can measure stuff, we can generate objective truths, we can do inference to best explanation, and then we can generate, policies and make claims and all of this. Okay, that's a modernist sensibility. And inside the academy and psychology, an empiricist modernist sensibility is what drives the vast majority of established psychological scientists, both in traditional psychology, like developmental cognitive personality psychology, and in what's called clinical science, which is the empirical scientific extension into treatment and psychopathology. Okay, so they have a modernist view of the world. All right. Then in most practice areas in counseling psychology, okay, what you have is an emerging postmodernist view. The postmodernist view is that, oh my gosh, the white male Christian hegemony that comes off of the Enlightenment then creates a colonialist package and really utilizes science to legitimize that hegemony, and then silences marginalized voices. And thus we need to compensate for indigenous populations, feminist, critical race theory, and then there's a suspicion that's brought to bear on empiricist claims and empiricist technologies like IQ testing. Okay? And that represents really the two dominant mindsets in psychology. So they are sort of, established modernists, with a postmodern critique that now is getting traction in the applied world of therapy. Okay, I came in and basically was the metamodernist includes and transcends both of those sensibilities. Okay, and basically what it argues is that you have the thesis of modernist science. Okay, which is partially true in the sense that you can generate sort of transcendental truth claims in some contexts that are valuable. The periodic table of the elements, certainly in chemistry, is a good example of that. So then, basically, then there's this whole question about, well, what claims can you make? Truth, scientific kind of claims about what I call mental behavior, which is the proper subject matter of psychology in my language system. And basically you get, the postmodern critique of the modernists that basically says, well, virtually all the claims you make are really embedded in a normative system that it really pre-exists and predetermines the certain kinds of findings that you'll get, how the people that you study, how you create norms, how you create value structures. And it's not up to the task of separating out the socio-historical context and underlying grammar of power and justification. That's the big tension. Okay.